Today we are going to be talking about functions in programming. Functions are one of the most important concepts in programming. They can help you write more organized, reusable, and efficient code. We are familiar with mathematical functions such as a simple linear function f of x equal to x plus 1. Given a value x, we can compute the value f of x. In programming, we also have functions which, given an input x, process the input and return an output. A function is a block of code that performs a specific task. It can be called and reused multiple times with different values, which make it a powerful tool to avoid code duplication, that is, writing an identical or almost identical piece of code multiple times in a large program. Generally, a function is composed of 4 different parts: the function name, the parameter list, the function body, and the return value. The function name is the identifier that is used to call the function. It should be descriptive of the task that the function performs. For example, we have already used a function without knowing it, the function called print. The parameter list is a list of variables that are passed to the function when it is called. The variables in the parameter list are used by the function to perform its task. For example, the print function can have 0 or more parameters separated by a comma, and it will display on the terminal the value of each parameter separated by a blank space. The function body is the code that is executed when the function is called. The function body typically contains a series of statements that perform the task that the function is designed to do. For example, the function body in the int function will contain a series of statements that convert a string that is passed to the function as a parameter into an int, that is, a whole number. The return value is the value that is returned by the function when it finishes executing. The return value can be any type of data, such as an integer, a floating point number, a string, or a list. For example, the str function returns the string representation of a number that is passed to its parameter. As you can see, the Python language already provides some useful functions called built-in functions. They are used to perform common tasks such as converting data types, manipulating strings, calculating mathematical expressions, working with files, accessing the operating system. To use a built-in function, you need to know its name and the argument that it takes. Therefore, to be an efficient programmer, you need to learn to read Python's documentation. Here are some of the most commonly used built-in functions in Python. Print text to the console. Input takes input from the user. Len returns the length of a string or a list. Type returns the type of an object. Int converts a string to an integer. Float converts a string to a floating point number. Str converts an object to a string. Min returns the minimum value between a and b. Max returns the maximum value between a and b. Pow returns a to the power of b. And finally, abs returns the absolute value of a. Not all common mathematical functions are part of the built-in collection. For example, to compute the cosine or sine of an angle, we need to import the maths module, something that we will explore in another video. What if I need a function that is not already defined in an existing module, and I need to create my own ad hoc function? The Python language, like most other programming languages, provides a specific syntax to do so. A function definition specifies the name of a new function and the sequence of statements that execute when the function is called. To define a function in Python, you use the def keyword. The syntax for defining a function is as follows. The def keyword is followed by the name of the function, which should be descriptive of the task that the function performs. The name of the function is followed by a pair of parentheses which contain the list of arguments that the function takes. The arguments are the values that are passed to the function when it is called. The body of the function is indented, and it contains the code that the function performs. The code in the body of the function is executed only when the function is called, not when it is defined. The return statement is used to return a value from the function. The return value is the value that is returned to the caller of the function. For example, if we want to implement the linear function f of x equal to x plus 1, we write the following code. First, we write the header of the function, def f open parentheses on x, and we close the parentheses followed by a colon. Then, we implement the body of the function, which must be indented. Here, the body is composed of the two statements, y equal to x plus 1 and return y. The function f can be called as follows. A equal f of 5, and then we print a. The return value of the function will be assigned to the variable a, and this code will print the value 11. Note that this code could have been written using a single statement, print f of 5. A final comment on this small piece of code. The naming convention I use for the function and the parameter is pretty poor, and it is not recommended to use a single character for function and parameters names. It was done here to illustrate the link between the mathematical definition of the linear function and its implementation in Python. For some computation, it is useful for a function to return more than one value. For example, given two whole numbers a and b, I would like to write a function, quotient and remainder, which returns the quotient, q, and the remainder, r, of the a divided by b. As you can see, the function must return two values, q and r. This is possible in Python, but not in some other languages like Java. To return multiple values, the return statement lists all the values to be returned, separated by a comma, as shown in this example. We can use multiple assignment to assign the return value to separate variables like so. Once the statement is evaluated, the variable quotient is assigned the value 2, whereas the variable remainder is assigned the value 3. Note that Python already has a built-in function to do just that, called divmod of a and b. To call a function, you need to know its name and the argument that it takes. The arguments are the values that are passed to the function when it is called. The syntax for calling a function is as follows. Function name, and then the list of arguments between round brackets, like argument 1, comma, argument 2, comma, and so on. We have already learned to call a function without knowing it, when we use a statement like int 1969. The function name is int and the parameter is a string 1969. If the function takes no arguments, you can simply call it by its name followed by the round bracket. For example, the following code calls the print function without passing any arguments. The code would print a blank line to the console. When you call a function, you can pass arguments to it. Arguments are values that are passed to the function when it is called. The function can then use these arguments to perform its task. In Python, there are two ways to pass argument to a function: positional argument and keyword argument. In this video, we will focus solely on positional argument. Positional arguments are passed to the function in the order that they are listed in the function definition. For example, the pow function takes two positional arguments, a and b, and returns a to the power of b. To compute 2 to the power of 5, we call the pow function with the argument 2 in the first position and 5 in the second position. When a function is called, the program will pause the current execution and start executing the code inside the function definition. Once the code inside the function is finished executing, the program will resume the execution where it left off. Let's see how it works when calling the function f defined here. As you can see, it is a linear function we mentioned earlier. First, the interpreter reads the function definition and creates a function object. Apart from that, nothing happens. The function is not executed. Next, the interpreter reads the statement on line 5 and evaluates the right-hand side of the assignment. The right-hand side of the assignment is a call to the function f with the argument 5. The function is then evaluated where the parameter x is assigned the value 5. Now, the interpreter executes the statement in the body of the function, starting with the statement on line 2. It evaluates the expression on the right-hand side of the assignment operator, which returns a value of 11. The value is then assigned to the variable y. Finally, the function returns the value 11 assigned to the variable y. Now, the function has terminated. The interpreter returns to the position where it left off. That is, the right-hand side of the assignment on the line 5. The value 11 is then assigned to the variable a. Finally, the program terminates by executing the print statement on line 6, displaying the message f of 5 is equal to 11. There are a few things you have to be careful with when calling functions. Make sure that you are calling the function with the correct number of arguments. Make sure that the type of the arguments are correct. And finally, assign to a variable or use in an expression the return value of the function if it has one. The last point is a common error that novice programmers find very frustrating. Often I will hear my students saying, I call the function, but nothing happens. This is not true. Something has happened, as shown with this code snippet. It is very similar to the previous code, except that we do not assign the result of the function call to a variable. Everything works the same way up to the function call's termination. The function returns the value 11, but when the interpreter moves to the next statement, the value is discarded. In a way, the interpreter reads the code as if you are saying, I do not need that value anymore. In summary, forgetting to assign the return value to a variable means that the function has been executed, a value has been returned, but the result has been discarded because you did not assign it to a variable. In this video, we have only scratched the surface of function in programming. However, we have learned enough about function to be able to use Python built-in function, in addition to creating and calling our own bespoke function. There are 4 important concepts that you need to remember from this video. How to define a function, how to call a function, function's parameters, and finally, values returned by a function. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.